good afternoon. This is your host, Diana Everett-Snyder. I've done a couple shows, and this is sort of the wrap-up to that, and it's a total smishmortion of some of the things that I've been talking about, but it heads off in a whole new arena that I really believe alternative media has been either not talking about or completely hyping like idiots. So let's get on with the show. Actually, before we get on with the show, I'd like to say thank you very much to Marguerite and to Neil and to Matt and to Vicky and to Sean for their amazing emails concerning the previous two shows that I did. And, of course, Margaret is a long-time listener of the show. And, Margaret, if you're listening now, I really appreciate all your feedback. And to those of you who want to give me any feedback, I'm just going to give out my email addresses right now. And feel free to drop me a line on anything at all. And the first one would be directly to Canary Chronicles at Outlook.com, or if you feel like it, you can write to me at Dinah Everett Snyder, that's all one word, Dinah Everett Snyder at hotmail.com. So, okay, now we can get on with the show. Terence McKenna, going to read a couple quotes from him. And the first one is, stop consuming images and start producing them. Second one is, you are a divine being, you matter, you count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms. You are an explorer, and you represent our species, and the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is in crisis because of the absence of consciousness. The male-dominant agenda is so fragile that any competitor is felt as a deadly foe. So, you simply have to turn your back on a culture that has gone sterile and dead, and get with a program of a living world and imagination. The imagination is the goal of history. I see culture as an effort to literally realize our collective dreams. Nature loves courage. You make the commitment, and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream, and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all those teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done. By hurtling yourself into the abyss and discovering it's a feather bed. I knew Terence, and he was pretty amazing. Anyway, and that's pretty much going to be the theme of, let me just put this down, of what I'm going to talk about today. We've been talking a lot about politics and all the false flags and the state of the nation and the state of the world and the crisis of the dollar and, the FDA and the NDAA and our insane politicians and our idiot president. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I think, by and large, the vast majority of people have simply tuned it out because it's too much information. It's too vast. It's too overwhelming. And everyone, it seems, feels as though they are separate individuals who are powerless. So, firstly, I want to say that, of course, 99% of the population comprises of us, and that 99% on a scale far outweighs 1% on a scale, and that the sooner we realize this and collectively start to address some of these issues without the leadership of our politicians and our news media, turn the TV off, turn the radio off, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, and organize yourselves in terms of growing food, in terms of educating your children, in terms of taking care of your health. All of these things, you don't need the politicians, you don't need the radio, you don't need the TV, you don't need to be told what to do by people that cannot relate to you at all. So something that Krishnamurti said is this: it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to profoundly sick society. And Martin Luther King said, it really boils down to this: all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Now, this heads directly into what I want to say. We live in a fractional universe. Everything is a fraction of everything else. Regardless of what you read and regardless of what you think you know, there truly are 11 dimensions, and you can break everything down infinitesimally into smaller and smaller things. And the interesting thing about doing that is that when you start breaking things down, even on a molecular level, you will find that what you have broken down can weigh more than what it weighed in its greater molecular form. A perfect example of this would be this thing we call platinum mining. We call it platinum mining, but we're not actually mining for platinum. We're mining for palladium. We get platinum from palladium, and we have a platinum group of elements, which is very interesting. It's a periodic table of elements. You can Google this and Google the platinum group and take a look. Now, palladium, it's an element that played a crucial role in the Fleischmann-Pons experiment. Don't know how many of you know about that, but it's also known as cold fusion. And for the longest time, science has refuted this notion of cold fusion. Even after Russians brought it to the London Science Fair and showed it as a proven theory. So, excuse me, cold fusion exists, and you should Google the Fleischmann-Pons experiment. Its atomic number is 46, and its elemental symbol is Pd. Now, palladium is a transitional metal, and these are located in groups 3 through 12 of the periodic table, and they're named after the asteroid Pallas, which is named for the goddess of wisdom. So you can Google all of that, and it's incredibly fascinating. But it goes to this whole thing of the fractional universe, and everything, of course, as we know, is made up of molecules. And as you break down these molecules, what you end up with is actually greater than the sum total of what you started with, which defies everything that is taught in colleges and universities around the world. And this is where we get into this whole concept, which I absolutely hate, called dogma. It's dogma that dictates our medical paradigm, which is my first love. And it's dogma in our medical paradigm that is killing people. It's dogma in politics, and it's dogma on the world stage that is killing people, left, right, and center, day in and day out. So getting back to these metals, I want you to Google something. It's called ORME, O-R-M-E. And ORME stands for Orbitally Rearranged Monatomic Elements. Now, ORME is the same as the tree of life, and it consists of 8 metals. And those would be ruthenium, rhodium, palladium, silver. Those are the light platinum group. Then you have the 4 in the heavy platinum group, which is osmium, iridium, platinum, and gold. And the interesting thing about all of these is that you find them everywhere in nature. We think of them as being really rare and scarce, and we have these huge mines that go in and mine for them. But you can actually extract it from sea sand, and you can extract it in varying amounts from regular garden dirt. So I'm going to leave that aside to head into more of the same, I guess. There are 2 emotions that we have, and that is fear and love. And all others branch directly or indirectly from these. We have 4 elements, and those are carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Fear has a very long, slow vibrancy frequency. Love has a rapid and high frequency. Water has a memory. There have been plenty of experiments done on the nature of water and the memory of water. And you have to understand that we are made up as human beings primarily of water. There are 64 possible codes of amino acids in our body. Our DNA structure is made from 4 elements. By any means of logic, we should have all 64 codes activated within our DNA structure. Yet we only have 20 active codes. Patterns of emotion are linked to genetic material, ours. The switch to switching amino acids on and off lies primarily within our emotional range. Fear, which is that long, slow wave, hits relatively few sites on our genomic code. of our human genomic code. Love, when we're feeling a positive emotional response to something, which is a higher frequency, much shorter wave, it's a much busier looking wave. So it touches many more points, like brush strokes, like keystrokes, along the potential sites for coding along that genetic thread. This is the tangible link between the emotions and our genetic codes. So our emotions directly affect the structure of our DNA, which directly affects the shape of the physical world that we experience every single day. Now, you can also Google something called phantom DNA experiment. I'm not going to get into too much of that. I would prefer if you looked it up. But this is a study that goes to proving everything that I've just said. Now, the harmonics of our universe is mirrored in our psyche and is a reflection of our existence. On December 21st, 2012, there was a natural flow of one form of energy to the next, called the Schumann's cavity, the resonance, that showed that it's increasing. We have the Schumann's resonance, which is, I guess, another thing that you should look up. It's an isochronic tone, and it's the global electromagnetic resonance that's excited by things like lightning discharges and fractional events that occur between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. And for those of you who are wondering why I'm talking about all of this, when I usually talk about politics and veterans and things like that, it's because it's all connected. Everything is connected. When you think of chemtrails and you think of what they're putting in our atmosphere, part of what they're putting in our atmosphere is smart dust. Now, smart dust, of course, is made up of metals. And some of those metals are long tubular filaments that carry an electronic charge. But not only do they carry an electronic charge, but they can hold an electronic charge. And because smart dust is self-organizing, they can transport this electromagnetic current and charge across vast distances. So for those people who are chemtrailing the skies, what they need to do is study the weather patterns and the wind patterns, and then they can make decisions on where to drop a chemtrail load to have it be picked up by the wind and moved to its final destination. And this, in part, is how they control weather, and it's how they control people, because some of the other elements in chemtrails are chemicals that alter our perception, our moods and our perceptions. So I'm giving you some hyper background to the things that you hear on alternative media, and some of what you maybe would hear on mainstream media, and some of the things that you would feel. And again, I urge everyone to Google the things that I bring up, because and to really make use of the internet while we have it, because there's a lot of fascinating YouTube videos. Any of these things, these words that I give you, you can go to YouTube and you can plug them in, and you can look at a vast array of YouTube videos that go into a lot of detail, and a lot of them have really great graphics and great narrators too. So that's really where I'm coming from today. I decided I was just going to throw caution to the wind and talk about some of this, what we call hyper background. Those of you that don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is, it's imperative that you understand what that is, that and the golden ratio. Now, the ancients called this the ancient circuitry. The cells receive the pulse, which is part of the Schumann's resonance, from the brain, which receives its pulse from the heart, which receives its pulse from the earth, and this pulse comes from the solar system, which comes from the galaxy, and ultimately from our entire universe. We share a pulse with all of existence. Truly we do. The Earth's pulse is 7.8 cycles per second, and this was a constant, fixed number until 1986. As we headed into 1987, it rapidly began increasing until 9 cycles per second in 1996. This was in a mere decade. By 2012, the pulse was at 13 cycles per second, just as the Fibonacci theory indicates. I'm not going to go into any more of that because I don't want to get too far off track. Famous last words. So I want you to go and, look into some of those. That ties into very definitely the unified field theory, which is also a part of the magnetic resonance and demonstrates the full set of physics principles by which Tesla's resonant wireless system operated. It's in identical fashion to the world's geopositioned networks. The ancient pyramids, the megaliths, and all the sacred sites, they all run along the same earth grid across our particular world. And there is an echo in the harmonic that reaches out into the cosmos. Now, everything vibrates because atoms vibrate. And that's because the subatomic particles, that is the fractional particles from which they're made, are in harmonic resonance or vibration, and they keep themselves in equilibrium. This goes to matter, antimatter, and dark matter. Now, it doesn't matter if you're looking at a cell in the body, a cell in a leaf, a cell in a tree, a cell in a monkey, a water molecule, something in the ionosphere, or you head out into space. The dynamic relationship between matter, antimatter, and dark matter remains a constant. Gravity's vibration, which is generated by the presence of mass, can be neutralized by altering the harmonic resonance of the gravitational field. So in other words, if you generate vibrations, you can alter gravity, and with superconductive materials, you can alter the amount of energy needed, and you can greatly reduce it at the same time. Now, Einstein's theory of relativity is interesting because, of course, we all perceive that this was not a completed work, when in fact it was completed and it was introduced in Spain. It was spoken about in France. It was written about extensively, and then it disappeared from sight, with the man himself continuing to talk about it years after that, as though he had not solved the problem. And it's not about solving the problem, because life is dynamic and molecular science is dynamic, and it's a continuing and perpetual cycle because we live in a fractional universe. But when you take the unified field theory and you express it in the language of like a differential topographical layout, like you look at a map and you see where the mountain ranges go up and how high they go, it's similar to the classical equations of relativity, but it encompasses particle physics because Einstein found that all particles are geons. Each particle is a different kind of twist in space-time, and the forces are therefore the ripples in the fabric. One of the solutions to the field equation is the description of a fundamental particle that has a negative charge, which is the geon with a minuscule wormhole. It has a closed time-like curve. The solution goes as far as to specify the mass of the particle, the mass of an electron, which is one of the hallmarks of the theory of everything that would predict the masses of all the fundamental particles. When you have this understanding, you see, in science, it's possible to find the solutions for particles with different charges and spins, and herein lies the understanding of quarks and tau lepton. The ultimate triumph of physics is a classical theory that incorporated quantum mechanics, which is a single set of equations that describes everything from the inner workings of a proton to the structure of the galaxy. This is really the string theory made multidimensional, but instead of strings of energy, this is loops of space-time that create the very fabric of everything. So there is something that I wrote, which you can go and look at. It's you can find it on the internet at, let me think, DinaEverettSnyder.wordpress.com. And I have written this out, this whole thing about Einstein's theory. And of course, there's a lot of it on the internet, but a lot of it is really disinformation. And something that all of these great minds, these great scientists went on to do was, when they were very young, they came up with fantastic theories. And then they spent the rest of, very legitimate, fantastical theories, but they then spent the rest of their lives coming up with elucidating theories that were only supported by their primary theories. And that's where things start to fall down, because that goes to the art of dogma where you create something fixed in time and space and words, and then you take everything else that you may come to find and experience and know and discover based on that primary example that you hold up as the shining light. Here are the ads, and we'll be right back.
Futurist and theoretical physicist Michio Kaku says new research is leading to scientific breakthroughs that could make mind-reading telekinesis a reality sooner than you may think. He details the possibilities in his new book, The Future of the Mind, and he is joining us here to explain it all and sum it up in 3 minutes. How do we do it? Great to see you.
Right, glad to be on the show.
So we've got smart pills, we've got forgetful pills, we've got everything. Where do you want to begin? How do we get there?
Well, first of all, just last year, for the first time in history, we actually uploaded a memory into a mouse. Next, we're going to upload memories into primates, like, for example, chimpanzees. And then we want to create a brain pacemaker for people with Alzheimer's disease, so they can upload a memory of who they are, who their children are, where they live. And then after that, who knows, maybe upload a vacation that you've never had. And think of it, college students will be able to take all the courses they flunked in college, learn that material. We're not there yet, but the first steps were taken last year. This is huge.
Well, I understand the application with Alzheimer's. That seems like a very good application of that possibility. But otherwise, why would we want to do this?
This could change the economy. Think of all the workers who are laid off because technology races on and they have to go to junior college and community college and relearn these skills. Think of college students who can take courses that they didn't pass in college. And this could affect entertainment. It could affect the economy. This is huge because our memories are who we are.
It's like an iPhone update. You just, plug in and then all of a sudden things appear in your mind and the programs work better.
Well, that's the goal. We're not there yet, but for animal studies, we can actually do that. When animals learn certain skills, we record the memory, and then we reinsert that memory back into what is called the hippocampus of the brain, and the animals learn it just like that.
What is it that you're inserting that is the memory?
Well, when you learn a task in the hippocampus, in the center of the brain, electrical activity surges in what is called the hippocampus. That is your memory organ. We record it. Just like you videotape something, we record the impulses going in the hippocampus.
So the impulses have a specific pattern or makeup that are unique to that particular
memory, right? We record it. And then later, after you've forgotten the task, we reinsert that very same signal into the hippocampus.
So you shoot
bingo,
an electronic signal.
That's right.
So is it just like the future version of the MRI? Like, where are we today in terms of steps of getting there in humans?
Well, see, MRI is passive in the sense that you're simply looking at energy flows of the thinking brain. We can do that now.
Yeah,
and that allows us to, quote, read thoughts.
Yeah, that was a dumb question. I knew that.
Right. This is active.
Speaking of dumb, just kidding.
Let me
this
shoot
is active. We're talking about uploading memories, experiences. One day we may have a brain net where the internet is replaced by memories, emotions, and feelings rather than digital.
What's the whole point of us being us then if you can change it and adapt it? I mean, what's the point of actually living your life?
Because you can enhance it. You can enrich it. You can learn new tasks. You can become better people. Okay?
All right, so I'm with you on this regard. But then what about this dream sharing concept? I don't think anyone wants to know what I'm dreaming about.
Well, first of all, it's possible now to put the brain in an MRI scan and compose thousands of dots of electrical activity and have a computer program recognize this to create a photograph. We can actually see what is going inside the living brain. And then if you go to sleep inside this MRI machine, for the first time in history, it'll actually print out crude pictures of what you're dreaming about.
How do you balance the enthusiasm you have for the science with the notion of with great power comes great responsibility, and how it would be used by people?
Well, we have to be very clear that false memories might also be uploaded. Vacations could be uploaded, but memories of crimes that never happened or
I'm hearing like the premise of every sci-fi movie I've seen in the past 5 years. Right now.
And also remember that President Barack Obama of the European Union had pledged over $1 billion to map the brain. This is huge. The next Human Genome Project will be the Connectome Project to give a map for the human brain, whereby we can actually see how mental illness operates. That's the short-term goal.
That would be huge.
Right.
Few needs are greater than that one, at least in an American society, to understand behavior.
Right, and it's in biblical times that mental illness is mentioned. And we realize that upwards of 15% of the American population at some point or other have had mental problems. And we don't know why. We're clueless as to the origin of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, OCD.
Maybe it would help it with the acceptance level also. We always deal with stories here now where there's criminal activity and the people claim to be mentally ill, and we don't want to use it as an excuse. There's a stigma against it, so knowledge would be very helpful.
Right. And one day, if we have the connectome, that is on a disc, all the pathways of the brain, some people have speculated that in some sense this will live on even after we die.
So, Professor, if this is what you're doing for fun, and you should read the book because, I mean, I already feel smarter. What are you doing for work?
Well, I'm a physicist, and we work on two great things. One is the origin of the universe. That's what I do professionally. That's what I do for a living. But we also look at the origin of the mind. These are the two greatest mysteries in all of science, outer space and inner space.
For more news, visit youtube.com/pigmind5.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.
Alright, so getting back to this whole fractional universe and Schumann's harmonic principle, something that we've all been reading about in mainstream media for the last couple of years is all these munitions plants that have been exploding, and of course sinkholes around the world. America's had its fair share. And here's what you need to know. Since the Schumann's harmonic frequency has been increasing, this is what you've been seeing in the physical realm, is exploding munitions. Let me just grab that cell phone. Sorry, I forgot to turn it off. What we know, for instance, about nuclear isotopes, it's a perfect example, because we've understood in the past that the decay of nuclear isotopes to date has not been a variable. It's been an incredible constant. The half-life of a nuclear particle was an incredibly constant, measurable event. But since 1987, 1988, we have seen an increase and a change in the decay rates of nuclear isotopes and in the soil structure on a fractional molecular basis. And because of that, and it's tiny, I mean, it's a trillionth of a fraction, but over a vast surface area like the Earth, you see this in sinkholes. It's one of those things that you see. So again, I'm giving you this huge background to all the events that we face every day in our world, and we talk about them in what we think is very real terms, but in a scientific and esoteric sense are quite superficial. Because too, if you understand this whole thing about harmonic frequency and fear and love and how it vibrates along our genomic and DNA, our genome, you understand how we are evolving and how we are changing. When you add in things like chemtrails, when you add in things like genetically modified foods, which have their own Trojan horses that reduce fertility, they increase cancer, they decrease IQ, then they increase the disease burden, all of these things. So when you understand that we have these multiple factors going on, and of course we do, humans, people, we do understand on an intrinsically human level that all is not right with our world. And this produces a fear. When we produce this fear in our bodies, we slow down our evolutionary process. We slow down our ability to heal. We slow down our ability to perceive and conceive of our reality. And it destroys our ability to have true and meaningful relationships with other people, with our children. It inhibits us from having job satisfaction. It inhibits us from thinking clearly. And so it's a multifaceted series of events that occurs for us. And that leads right into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is morphic fields. And so just as we can measure harmonic resonance, and just as we can measure and we can provide scientific proof of the memory of water, we have also, actually Rupert Sheldrake is the man that was originally responsible for the discussion topics of morphic fields. However, he is one of those scientists that discovers something and then spends the rest of his life creating all this other mumbo-jumbo that reinforces the original thought. So everything that comes after is pretty much dogma and is irrelevant. And so Rupert Sheldrake should be lauded and remembered for his work on morphic fields. And then everything he says after that should just be scrubbed off the slate. Because, and this is something that you should absolutely Google to understand your relationship with everything around you. Morphic fields are invisible, organizing fields of influence. They are the non-tangibles. They are essentially what comprises the spiritual realm. That's not the Christian realm, the Judaic realm, the Islamic realm. This is beyond all of that. This is the fractional relationship between us and everything, and we are a part of everything. It's like the magnetic field around a magnet. When you try and put magnets together the wrong way and they repel, and you put them together the right way and they are drawn towards each other. Now, the exact nature of morphic fields is, let me see, to specify, you can describe them mathematically, and already there are mathematical models that have been made of these fields. And it shows that there's an inbuilt memory. We have an intrinsic memory, just as animals have a memory of where to fly, at what time, or how to migrate at what time of the year. This is part of this morphic field energy that is a dynamic flow. It's not a flux, it's a flow between our genetic material and everything around us. The relativity between us and matter, antimatter, and dark matter on a fractional molecular level, scale. And it encompasses our minds. And that's an interesting thing, our mind. All of these things that are being done to us in the real world, chemicals that we're given, the vaccines, the pharmaceuticals, the nanotechnology in our food and our antibiotics, and in our air and in our water, and it's just we're inundated in our GMOs and chemtrails and all these things that we talk about, particularly in alternative media. They damage us very physically, apart from our DNA, which they've altered. But they damage us on a day-to-day level by attacking our thyroid and our pituitary gland, which in turn has a happenstance event on our hypothalamus and our pineal gland, or as Americans say, pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the seat of consciousness. In mind and brain experiments that have been done through DARPA, they have shown very conclusively that as someone is dying, the very last moments after the last breath has been taken and clinical death has been observed, and they've already taken the time of death, the very last light, the very last murmur of color in aura in the human body and in animals, the experiments of course have been done in animals too, is in the pineal gland. And this is very telling because people that have been declared clinically dead and have then been amazingly brought back to life all tell a very similar story. And the story that they tell is that of going down a long tunnel, seeing a light at the end. Perhaps they even make it that far and they see loved ones that have already passed over to the other side, that have died. They hear angels, they see lights, they see bright lights, they see colors. There's all sorts of variations on this, but there is an overall theme. Now, the scientific observation of that, of course, is that every cell in the body is committed to preserving the brain, because the brain is where it happens. Every single cell in the brain is committed to preserving energy, life force, photon energy, light energy. in the pineal gland. So when you look at the pineal gland, there's only one. It's a tiny little walnut-shaped thing in your head, and there's only one. You have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils. Your mouth is very symmetrical. You have 2 ears, 2 hands, 2 feet, and so we go. You have 1 heart, but it has 2 chambers. You have 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, and so we go. But you only have 1 pineal gland, and it is the root of your spiritual consciousness. You can Google DMAA, and you can also Google DMAE, and to understand a little more about some things that Terence McKenna got into. And of course, you're welcome to Google Terence McKenna too. But I think it's important to understand where the pineal gland fits in the scheme of things. Here are the ads. We'll be right back.
We're standing at the cusp of the greatest evolutionary change in the history of mankind. What's coming in the next few years, and when I say few, the definition is about 3 to 5 years max, is going to completely redefine the very definition of what a human being is on the planet Earth. In fact, I can tell you without any doubt at all that the generation of our children, the kids who are today at 15 or 20 years old, they're the one last 100% human generation of people on the planet Earth. Their children, my grandchildren, they're going to be anything but human. They'll be transhuman children. They'll be false-human. They'll be machines. They'll be cyborgs. They'll be beings who are not totally human as a result of synthetic biology. Our DNAs are being changed as we speak through genetically modified crop. And again, what is about to hit us, human beings of humanity, over the next few years, combined with all the geopolitical changes in the world, which, needless to say, I explain in the book, are not some irrelevant facts which we shouldn't worry about, but very much form part of this continuum, which includes all of these elements such as transhumanism, transevolution, synthetic biology, space exploration, economy, destruction of the world economy. And as I said again, it's the first book out there that puts all of these elements on one plateau and gives us a roadmap of humanity, or for humanity, of our near future.
Wow. A while back I ran across this report, and it was called the National Intelligence Council's predictions for 2030. And essentially, they predict, if you read this, it seems that, yes, they talk about population growth, they talk about changing geopolitical realities, but they also bring up that in 2030, exactly what you said, people are going to be, what we see as the internet today will be like thinking about when, people were kids in the 70s playing Pong on like a little Atari system.
All of these reports actually have a basis, and the basis for these reports that you mentioned is the report that I got, which is actually how I got interested in writing this book 10 years ago. So the kernel of what today is my new book, Transevolution, began back in 2005 at the Bilderberg Conference in Rotterdam, Germany, when one of my sources gave me a partial, it wouldn't be a report at the time, it would be a draft of what later turned out to be a blueprint on the future strategic trends for the entire planet Earth. And the report, which came out in 2007, is called Strategic Trends Report 2007-2036, a secret source document on the future of humanity. Today you can actually download it for free off of the internet. It's a 91-page report. I very strongly suggest people download it and read it. It's astonishing at how well these people understand the future of humanity. And when I say these people, these aren't some mindless or faithless bureaucrats. These are some of the greatest evolutionary thinkers, futurists, scientists, social scientists, geostrategists in world history. Again, Strategic Trends Report 2007-2036. 2036. And some of the conclusions of that report are striking us starkly. For example, between now and 2036, the world's population will explode to 10 billion people in one generation. About 2/3 of the world's population will be living in areas of water stress. So we're talking about by 2036, there are 10 billion people. About 7 billion people will be living in areas where there's going to be lack of water. So lack of food, water, medicine, proper hygiene, education, basic human necessities will spell collapse according to the report. And without mincing words, these people state explicitly that a growing gap between majority and a small number of highly visible super rich is likely to pose an increasing threat to social order and stability, and the result of that will result in civil war, intracommunal violence, insurgency, pervasive criminality, and widespread disorder. And as a result of that, they're talking about the breakdown of the very political international system and the globalized economy, which will result in the breakdown of countries. And by the 2036, countries will be replaced in most parts of the world by mega cities. And this report defines mega cities by population base of anywhere from 20 to 30 billion people. And again, so what we're looking at the change, the generational change in the very definition and understanding of what humanity is and how the world itself is going to be run.
Okay, what it sounds like you're describing for the listeners is essentially a Hunger Games scenario, kind of a dystopian future where there's going to be the haves, who will be like in maybe a more modified version of our gated cities concepts, and the have-nots, which will be increasingly competing with each other for what limited resources that are still out there available for them.
For more news, visit youtube.com/pigmind5.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.
Alright, this is Diane Everett Snyder. We're into the last segment of today's show. And I've been talking about morphic fields and Schumann's harmonic resonance, which is all about Einstein and its torsion field physics. And it goes to this concept of everything is connected. I've tried to put in some real-time examples so that you can understand the realm that I'm talking about and how it's connected to everything that goes on around us. So we understand this in a very real-time sense. We talk about the bankers and the banking cartel and the shadow government and, all of this. And in the past, I've talked extensively about brain science and brain mapping and the Genome Project. So for those of you who don't know about the Genome Project, please go and Google that. The wars since the Gulf War have provided virtually unlimited resources for scientific experimentation in terms of our returning veterans who've been hurt on the battlefield. They return to hospitals in Germany, where because of our fast-paced technology and emerging sciences in the technological fields, they've been able to aggressively pursue brain science, cryogenics, and nanotechnology. And we, the people, have been on the receiving end of the most horrific science experiments that, if you knew the true breadth and scope of, it is my belief that most people would simply sit down and stop breathing, because it really is quite frightening. People, to them, these shadow government, shadow people, shadow operators, who are really beyond the reach of everyone. You don't read about them on the Forbes list of the wealthiest people in the world or the most influential, because they are so far beyond that. They are that faceless. And to these people, control is its own aphrodisiac. They have unlimited resources to anything and everything. So they're pushing the boundaries. They have pushed the boundaries and the envelope of everything that you could possibly imagine in your wildest imaginings. And we have allowed this to happen because we have been unknowing and unwilling to take issue with it. So they have continued, and it has become extremely overt. It's not about the money. You are seeing the death throes of society at large. For the first time in humanity's collective history, we are all tied to one currency, one denomination of currency, and that's the US dollar. And the US dollar is crashing. And evidence of that is the death of all of the bankers. I go online, people send me articles about the bankers that have committed suicide, they've jumped from buildings, they've killed themselves with nail guns, I mean, the most ridiculous things. And people ask me for a comment or an opinion, and the whole thing is really silly because it's like, trying to eat a whole apple in the dark with no taste buds. It's not about the money. These people already have everything. There's nothing left for them to buy or own. The quest for them is all about control. They don't love, they dominate. They don't understand anything else. This domination, which has been passed down and has become inculcated in their own genetic pools, is a self-fulfilling closed circle that too is self-destructive. Firstly, to them, and secondly, because they control everything, there is a fallout across the landscape of this world to our natural resources, to our earth, to our trees, to our animals. At no time before in history have we seen the extinction of as many different forms of life on this planet as we've seen in the last 25 years. And then ultimately, of course, the destruction of humanity. So at that level of these people, these shadow people, they are absolutely bent on the holy grail of life, supposedly the holy grail of life, and that is immortality. To this end, they've employed or enslaved the best of the best in terms of the scientific minds, philosophical minds, and the technological minds. And money is of no consequence because they want to drive the innovation into the mind science and the technology of immortality. Now, to understand the breadth and scope of this, you should also understand that a mere 3% of all the discoveries since 1917 in science, in medicine, in technology, only 3% has made it out into the real world where it has had any meaningful impact on humanity as a whole. 97% of it has been weaponized, shelved, or worked on in secret in laboratories around the world, deep underground, in mountains, in buildings, in remote locations. And the US and Russia together are incredibly and incestuously involved together in this brain mapping and quest to drive the understanding of immortality. They're looking to create the perfect receptacle to house their brains, which they see as the seat of the immortality, because they understand this concept of the pineal gland and its photon energy. See, when you die, you become light energy, and you go out into the universe not as matter, but as light. Their greed is so profound, and their desire to conquer is so all-encompassing, that what they see as a human hurdle is irrelevant. All they want is to dominate through subjugation and control of the ultimate kill switch, which is life itself. But in their arrogance and their oblivion of the realities, the non-tangibles, they've lost sight of, almost likely they probably never knew of, the reality of the senses and the ethereal nature of existence. So they've put all this money and all this energy into the cryogenics and the machinery and the technology for machines capable of housing and sustaining the brain. And then they're left wondering why neuron death continues to occur despite their attention to the scientific details. So you see at a very wealthy and visible public level when people like Steve Jobs get ill with life-threatening illnesses like cancer, the cutting-edge science that they employ and the hurdles that they're able to overcome, that regular people are not able to overcome, like, procuring an organ donator with an exact match, within 72 hours. All of these hurdles that they're able to overcome, they are so caught up in their own dogmas of scientific discovery that it becomes the essential thing that trips them up. So you need to also know that they're creating artificial hearts, they're creating genetically modified and engineered blood, and because of the way the FDA has ruled on genetically modified organisms, should you have an accident and be in need of a blood transfusion, will not know that the blood that you are receiving is plasma before, during, or after your surgery because of your crisis, your accident, your heart transplant, the bleeding that you had after you gave birth to a baby. You will not know that this blood that you were given was grown in a pig, because it does not have to be labeled as genetically modified or genetically engineered. And they currently have pigs that are 7th generation, that are, to all intents and purposes, completely human. Why? Because the blood that runs through their veins and arteries is not just compatible with humans, so we wouldn't have to take any anti-rejection drugs. It's not that. It's that the blood in these veins and arteries of these pigs are intrinsically human. The downside of that is that along with this 99.99% human blood are these trace elements of pig DNA. So there has been no scientific discovery, no scientific inquiry into what happens generationally over time to the human body and the human genomic sequence when they have been exposed to this genetically engineered, because it's created from scratch. It's not modified. They didn't take human blood and modify it. They created it in this pig by hybridizing and hyperbreeding cycles in very controlled environments. They have not understood. They don't understand because they adhere to a dogma that dictates that there's no need to understand what happens historically down the road to humanity and the evolution of humanity as they're exposed to these pieces of DNA from pigs through blood, through insects, through vaccines, through insects and molecular chemical combinations that are inserted into the DNA of the very foods that we eat, foods that are grown out in fields, not to mention molecular foods that are created in labs to look like certain foods, but that on a molecular basis are absolutely not food. They are mad scientists, and every single person living on this planet is part of their crazy, crazy scientific experiment. And this goes back to this whole thing about, our fractional universe, and it goes to something else, which is where science is heading, and which is why I actually quit my think tank job. And it's this thing called transhumanism. Now, at first examination, transhumanism is a complex and quickly evolving Promethean school of thought. It's loosely woven together with a variety of conversations and points of view. It's a kind of a crazy quilt, of ideas and technologies in which it's difficult initially to discern much more than a common definition. Everyone has their own opinion on what transhumanism is, and it seems that there are already a few manifestos still glowing from the forge of creation on this whole transhumanism thing. But they have lost sight of their essential humanity and those things that are intrinsically beyond the realm of the tangibles and have entered the realm of the other dimensions and the photon energy of the plasma that makes up cosmos in which we live. So I think that I'm actually going to stop right there today, and I will continue this on my show next week. And so don't forget to drop me a line, any thoughts and opinions on this week's show, and I will continue this next week, Tuesday at 5 o'clock on Wide Awake News, and you can catch a rebroadcast of this show on the Canary Chronicles, which is over at ucy.tv. And lastly, we are moving to boycott Nestle. Of course, their foods and products are filled with nanobot technology, and Nestle Corporation believes that water is not an inherent right. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Well, actually, the Strategic Trends Report calls it the future world, the world of Blade Runner. It's it's a very appropriate definition, because if you think back to the Blade Runner when it first came out in the early 1980s, and a screenplay written by a brilliant American screenwriter by the name of David Peebles. It's the same guy who actually wrote Accidental Tourist, just to give you an idea. It very much fits the bill of what that world and the future near world will look like. And when you combine the technological advancements in all of its manifestations, in all of its fields, as I explain painstakingly in my new book, you have to understand that these people who work on these futuristic reports and scenarios, they don't make mistakes ever. There's never any room for mistakes in what they do, because every element of power is controlled by the people who run the world from behind the scenes. And one of the reasons, again, it's something that to a lot of people is very difficult to understand, is because people think of politics as foreign and national, whereas in fact national and foreign policies have very little to do with the world, the way the world is run, and have very little effect on the world's development. It's the global politics which affect everything that's around us. And these global politics are not run by Congress, by Barack Obama's, Putin's, or anybody else. It's run on a supranational level by these, call them globalists, elites, whatever you want to call them, from behind the scenes. Mind-boggling technologies, everything from brain enhancements, neuroscience to nanotechnology, synthetic biology, space exploration. So that this gap between us and them is getting greater and greater.
For more news, visit youtube.com/pigmind5.